Yak, a man tasked with selling an alien widow and child. Part 1. Marcus Rodriguez had seen worse jobs in his 15 years as a debt collector for the Galactic Commerce Union. He'd repossessed starships from broke traders, evicted entire colonies from disputed planets, and once had to collect a living moon from a gambler who'd betted on a rigged card game. But standing outside the cramped habitat pod on Kepler Station, staring at the work order in his weathered hands, he felt something twist in his gut that had nothing to do with the recycled air. The document was clinical in its coldness. Asset Recovery Notice. 2 Zeltharian life forms. Adult female, approximate age 34 standard years. Juvenile male, age 7 standard years. Property of Nexus Financial Corp. Following default on industrial loan, 447821. Market value, 85,000 credits for adult, 45,000 for juvenile. Immediate transfer required. Marcus had never dealt with Zeltharians before, but he'd heard stories. They were one of the few truly peaceful species in the galaxy, evolved from herd animals on a world where cooperation meant survival. Their entire culture was built around family bonds so strong that separating them was considered worse than death. The Commerce Union had banned the practice of using Zeltharians as collateral decades ago, but old contracts still surfaced sometimes, left over from the darker days when alien rights were more suggestion than law. He pressed the door chime and waited. The sound that came from inside wasn't quite crying, wasn't quite singing, but something in between that made his chest tight. When the door finally slid open, Marcus found himself looking down at a creature that stood barely to his shoulder. Her skin was a soft blue-gray, covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow like water. 2 large, dark eyes dominated her face, eyes that held an intelligence and sadness that reminded him uncomfortably of his own daughter. "You are the human who comes for us," she said, her voice carrying a melodic quality despite the tremor of fear. Her translator pendant worked perfectly, but couldn't hide the way her hands shook as she gestured him inside. The habitat pod was tiny, maybe 20 square meters, but she'd made it into something resembling a home. Soft fabrics hung from the walls in colors that reminded Marcus of Earth sunsets. The air smelled of something like cinnamon and rain. In one corner, a small figure hunched over what looked like a drawing tablet, his young face scrunched in concentration. "I am Kirith Moonweaver of the Third Grove," the female said, using the formal introduction of her people. "This is my child, Zentar Smallsong. We are ready to go." The casual acceptance in her voice hit Marcus harder than any pleading would have. She'd known this day was coming, had prepared herself and her son for it. The resignation in her posture told a story of someone who'd already fought every fight she knew how to fight and lost them all. "Ma'am, Marcus started, then caught himself. He'd been about to apologize, which was against company policy. Emotional involvement led to poor decision-making. He'd learned that lesson the hard way years ago. "I need to explain the process. You'll be transported to the processing center on Titan Station, where you'll undergo medical evaluation and preparation for sale. The child will go to the youth facility on Europa until a suitable buyer is found." The little one, Zentar, looked up at the word sale with eyes too knowing for his age. He said something in his native language, a series of liquid sounds that the translator didn't attempt to convert. Kirith responded in kind, her voice gentle but firm. Whatever she told him made his small shoulders straighten with what looked like forced bravery. "He asks if we will be together," she translated unnecessarily. Marcus had understood perfectly well from context. "I tell him we go where the currents take us," as his father would have said. "Your husband?" Marcus found himself asking, though it wasn't relevant to the job. "Killed in the mining accident that caused our debt," she said simply. "The tunnel collapsed because Nexus Financial would not pay for proper safety equipment. 43 workers died. The families were told we were responsible for the lost equipment and ore. Marcus felt his jaw clench. He'd seen this pattern before. Corporations setting up no-win situations, then collecting on the inevitable failures. It was legal, technically, but it left a taste in his mouth like copper and shame. "We should go," he said, his voice rougher than intended. "The transport leaves in an hour." Kirith nodded and moved to a small shrine in the corner where holographic images of Zeltharians flickered in soft light. She whispered something that sounded like a prayer or goodbye, then touched her son's shoulder. The boy carefully packed his drawing tablet and a small stuffed creature that looked like a cross between a rabbit and a jellyfish. As they walked through the station's corridors toward the transport bay, Marcus found himself studying them. Kirith moved with dignity despite her circumstances, occasionally placing a protective hand on her son's back when other aliens stared too long or too hard. Zentar stayed close to his mother, but Marcus caught him looking around with the curiosity of a child who couldn't quite suppress his wonder at the vast station around them. At one point, they passed a viewport showing the swirling blue and white of a gas giant. Zentar stopped so suddenly that Marcus nearly walked into him. The boy pressed his small hands against the transparent aluminum and made a sound of pure delight. He rattled off something in Zeltharian that made his mother smile for the first time since Marcus had met her. "He says the planet looks like the singing pools from home," she translated, "where the young ones learn to swim and make their first songs." "You have oceans?" Marcus asked, surprising himself again with his curiosity. "Had," she corrected gently. "Nexus Financial strip-mined them for the crystalline formations beneath. The water turned toxic. We were relocated to the underground facilities for our protection." The way she said the last word made it clear what she thought of that protection. Marcus started to say something, then closed his mouth. Getting emotionally involved never helped anyone. It just made the job harder and changed nothing about the outcome. The transport bay was crowded with beings from a dozen different worlds, all waiting for their various ships. Marcus guided Kirith and Zentar toward the secure area where prisoner transports docked. The ship that would take them to Titan Station was a brutal-looking thing, all angular metal and no viewports. It looked exactly like what it was, a flying cage. "Before we board," Marcus said, pulling out his scanner to complete the transfer documentation, "I need to verify your identities and take custody recordings." The scanner beeped as it cataloged their biometric data, reducing them to numbers in a database. Kirith submitted to the process without complaint. But when Marcus knelt down to scan Zentar, the boy looked up at him with those enormous dark eyes and said something that made his mother gasp. "What did he say?" Marcus asked. Kirith looked troubled. He asks if you have children of your own. It is not a question our young ones typically ask strangers." Marcus stared at the boy, who was still watching him with an intensity that seemed to see straight through him. "Yes," he said finally. "I have a daughter." Zentar nodded as if this confirmed something important, then held out his small hand. In his palm was the stuffed creature he'd been carrying. "He wants to give this to your daughter," Kirith translated, her voice thick with emotion. "It is his most treasured possession. He says she should not be alone when the dark times come." The stuffed animal was clearly handmade, sewn with care from what looked like pieces of old clothing. One ear was slightly crooked, and it had been patched in several places with loving precision. Marcus could see tiny finger marks in its fabric where it had been held countless times for comfort. "I can't," Marcus started, but Zentar pressed the toy into his hands with surprising firmness for such a small being. The boy's eyes were bright with tears, but his expression was determined. "In our culture," Kirith said softly, "when we know we may not see the next sunrise, we give our most precious things to those who continue walking in the light. He honors you and your child with this gift." Marcus looked down at the stuffed creature in his hands, then at the boy who had just given away what might be his only comfort in whatever was coming. Something cracked inside his chest, something he'd spent years building up to protect himself from exactly this kind of moment. "All right," he said, his voice barely steady. "I'll make sure she gets it." The transport's loading alarm sounded, harsh and mechanical after the gentle melody of Zeltharian voices. Marcus stood up, the toy clutched in one hand, his scanner in the other. He was supposed to escort them aboard now, strap them into the prisoner restraints, and file his completion report. The job was almost done. Instead, he found himself looking at Kirith and her son, really seeing them for the first time. Not as assets to be transferred or problems to be solved, but as people. A mother trying to be brave for her child. A little boy giving away his treasures to a stranger's daughter he'd never meet. "The transport is ready for prisoner loading," the mechanical voice announced over the comm system. Marcus closed his eyes, thinking about his own daughter safe at home on Mars, thinking about the stuffed animal in his hands, thinking about 43 workers who died because safety equipment was too expensive. When he opened them again, his decision was already made. "There's been a change of plans," he said, turning away from the transport. "We're not going to Titan Station today." Kirith stared at him in confusion. "I do not understand." "Neither do I. Not entirely," Marcus admitted. "But I know I'm not putting you and your boy on that ship. Not today. Not ever if I can help it." He grabbed their hands, the stuffed animal still clutched in his other fist. "We need to move, now. Before they realize you're not on the transport." As he led them quickly away from the docking bay, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years of debt collection work. For the first time in a long time, he was about to do something that felt right instead of just legal. And if that meant burning his career and probably ending up in a Nexus financial prison cell, well, he'd faced worse odds. Behind them, the transport sealed its doors and began its automated departure sequence, its cargo bay empty, except for the confused reports that would soon follow. A man tasked with selling an alien widow and child. Part 2. The abandoned maintenance section of Kepler Station smelled like rust and old dreams. Marcus had used this hideout before when jobs went sideways, but never with two aliens in tow who trusted him with their lives. He'd disabled the security cameras with a trick he'd learned from a reformed thief on Proxima, giving them maybe 6 hours before someone noticed the gaps in surveillance. Kirith sat cross-legged on an old crate, her son curled against her side as she hummed something that sounded like starlight and memories. The melody seemed to calm the boy's fears, but Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes never stopped moving, looking for escape routes or new dangers. "You have made yourself a criminal for us," she said when the humming stopped. This was not wise. "Probably not," Marcus agreed, checking his handheld scanner for security alerts. 3 messages already, asking for confirmation of the asset transfer. Soon they'd be looking for him actively. "But my daughter would never forgive me if I let them sell you." "Your daughter does not know us. She would if she met you. That's how she is." Marcus pocketed the scanner and really looked at them for the first time since their escape. "The question is, what do we do now? They'll be watching all the commercial transports off station. My ship is impounded as collateral for a bad job last month. We're effectively trapped." Zentar looked up from where he'd been drawing on his tablet, holding it out to show Marcus a picture of 3 figures standing together under what looked like 2 suns. The detail was remarkable for a 7-year-old, especially one working under such stress. "He draws the future he hopes for," Kirith translated. "It is something our children learn early. If you can see tomorrow, you can walk toward it." Marcus studied the drawing more carefully. The 3 figures were clearly them, but they looked happy, safe. The 2 suns made him think of the binary system where his daughter lived with his ex-wife on New Colorado. It was a farming world, quiet and peaceful. the kind of place where refugees might disappear into honest work and simple lives. "How good are you at agricultural labor?" he asked suddenly. Kirith blinked in surprise. "My people were farmers before we were forced into the mines. Zentar knows the old songs that help plants grow strong. But surely you do not mean New Colorado," Marcus said, the plan forming even as he spoke. "Binary sons, just like his drawing. It's a farming world, always short on workers. The local government doesn't ask too many questions about documentation if you can pull your weight in the fields." "And you think we could reach this place?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, running through the logistics in his head. "There's a freight hauler captain I know. Owes me a favor from when I helped her avoid some legal trouble on Ganymede. She runs agricultural supplies to New Colorado twice a month, but it would mean giving up everything I have here. My apartment, my job, my contacts. Nexus Financial doesn't forgive betrayal lightly. They'd make sure I never worked in debt collection again, probably blacklist me from any legitimate employment in the core systems." Kirith was quiet for a long moment, studying his face with those intelligent dark eyes. "You would sacrifice your life as you know it for strangers." "Not strangers," Marcus said, surprised by the certainty in his voice. "Family doesn't leave family behind." The word hung in the air between them like a promise. Zentar looked up from his drawing tablet and said something in Zeltharian that made his mother smile through her tears. "He says you have the heart song of a grove father," she translated. "It is the highest honor my people can give." Before Marcus could respond, his scanner erupted in alerts. Security teams were mobilizing, search protocols activating. They had maybe 20 minutes before this section was swept by armed guards with bioscanners. "We need to move now," he said, gathering their few possessions. "The freight docks are on the other side of the station. We'll have to go through the main commercial district." "Will we not be seen?" Marcus pulled out a small device that looked like a jewelry box. "Identity scramblers. Illegal as hell, but they'll make the security cameras see us as someone else for about an hour. Problem is, they only work if we act natural. No running, no hiding, no looking suspicious." He handed one to Kirith and clipped a smaller one to Zentar's shirt. "We're just a human and his alien friends going shopping. Nothing unusual about that on a cosmopolitan station like this." The walk through the commercial district was the longest 30 minutes of Marcus's life. Twice they passed security patrols, and he had to force himself not to tense up as the guards glanced their way. Kirith proved to be a natural actress, even stopping to admire goods in shop windows, while her son pressed his face against the glass like any curious child. It was at one such shop that disaster nearly struck. Zentar had stopped in front of a toy store, his eyes wide with wonder at the mechanical creatures dancing in the display. A security guard noticed him and started walking over, probably just to make friendly conversation with a cute alien kid. Marcus's hand went to the weapon concealed under his jacket, but Kirith was faster and smarter. She started singing, a gentle Zeltharian lullaby that drew attention from half the corridor. Within moments, they were surrounded by curious shoppers and tourists, all enchanted by the beautiful alien melody. The security guard stopped to listen as well, and Marcus used the distraction to scoop up Zentar and guide them through the crowd toward the freight docks. When the song ended, they received enthusiastic applause from the gathered crowd, and more than one person pressed credits into Kirith's hands for the impromptu performance. "That was brilliant," Marcus whispered as they reached the freight section. "Zeltharians are natural performers," she replied, but he could see the pride in her eyes. "We have always survived by giving others joy." The freight docks were a maze of cargo containers and loading equipment, filled with the controlled chaos of interstellar commerce. Marcus led them through the industrial landscape until they reached Docking Bay 17, where a battered cargo hauler called the Dust Walker was taking on supplies. Captain Sarah Chen was exactly where Marcus expected to find her, arguing with a loading supervisor about cargo manifests and delivery schedules. She was a small woman with graying hair and the kind of weathered face that came from decades of flying the dangerous routes between frontier worlds. "Marcus Rodriguez," she said when she spotted him approaching. "I heard you were having some career troubles. Something about losing a very valuable asset?" Word travels fast. Faster when there's a 50,000 credit bounty on your head. Chen's eyes flicked to Kirith and Zentar. "And I'm guessing these are the assets in question." Marcus felt his heart sink. If Chen was going to turn them in for the bounty money— "Relax," she said, reading his expression. "I'm not in the business of selling people, even if they are technically corporate property. But I am curious why a by-the-book debt collector suddenly grew a conscience. You ever have one of those moments where you realize you've been on the wrong side of things?" Marcus asked. Chen looked at Zentar, who was staring up at her with the same intense curiosity he'd shown Marcus. "Kid's got your number, doesn't he? Always could read people better than their own species. All right, Rodriguez, I owe you one, and I pay my debts, but this makes us more than even." "Understood. Can you get us to New Colorado?" "Not directly. Too much heat on the main routes right now. But I can get you to Ceres Station, and from there you can catch a grain hauler to the outer colonies. It'll add 2 weeks to the journey, but it'll keep you off Nexus Financial's tracking grid." Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "When do we leave?" "Soon as the cargo's loaded. But you need to understand something. Once you're in my hold, you're stowaways. If we get boarded by customs or corporate security, I've never seen you before in my life. You're on your own." "Fair enough." Chen looked at Kirith and Zentar again, her expression softening slightly. "The outer colonies are rough, especially for refugees. You sure this is better than taking your chances with the courts?" "The courts that ruled 43 dead miners were somehow responsible for their own deaths," Marcus asked. "The same legal system that allows corporations to use sentient beings as collateral? Yeah, I'm sure." The captain nodded slowly. "All right then. Bay 7, cargo container marked agricultural supplies. Be there in 10 minutes and bring everything you can't live without. Once we're in hyperspace, there's no going back." As Chen walked away to finish her preparations, Marcus turned to find Kirith watching him with an expression he couldn't read. "You are certain about this path?" she asked. "There will be no returning to your old life." Marcus thought about his apartment on the station, his carefully built reputation, his professional contacts. All of it felt as distant as someone else's memories. "My old life involved selling families into slavery. I think I can do better." "And your daughter? You said she lives on New Colorado?" "She does, with her mother on a farm outside the capital. I was planning to visit next month anyway." He smiled at the irony. "Looks like I'll be staying longer than expected." Zentar tugged on his mother's sleeve and whispered something that made her eyes widen. "What did he say?" "He asks if this means we will be safe now, that no one will try to separate us again." Marcus looked down at the boy who had given away his most precious possession to a stranger's child, who had drawn a picture of the 3 of them together under twin suns. "Yeah, kid, we're going to be safe. All of us together." The loading alarm for the Dust Walker echoed through the docking bay, and Marcus felt something settle in his chest that he realized was peace. For the first time in years, he was doing something that felt right all the way down to his bones. "Come on," he said, leading his new family toward their uncertain but hopeful future. "Let's go home." A Man Tasked with Selling an Alien Widow and Child, Part 3. The golden wheat fields of New Colorado stretched toward the horizon like a sea of liquid amber, swaying in the gentle breeze that carried the scent of growing things and possibility. Marcus stood on the porch of the farmhouse he'd been calling home for the past 8 months, watching Zentar race through the rows with his daughter Emma, their laughter mixing with the alien melodies that helped the crops grow stronger than anyone had thought possible. It had been a harder transition than any of them expected. The first month on Ceres Station, hiding in cargo containers and sleeping rough in the asteroid belt's mining tunnels had tested their resolve. Kirith had fallen ill from the recycled air and artificial gravity, and Zentar had nightmares about security guards coming to take his mother away. Marcus had burned through most of his savings, just keeping them fed and hidden while they waited for safe passage to the outer colonies. But humans, Marcus had learned, were remarkably adaptable. And Zeltharians, despite their peaceful nature, had a core of strength that ran deeper than steel. Kirith had recovered her health and more than that, her hope. Zentar had found his courage again, and his natural curiosity about the world around him. The grain hauler that finally took them to New Colorado had been captained by a woman named Torres, who asked no questions and accepted payment in labor. Marcus had spent 3 weeks helping maintain the ship's systems, while Kirith and Zentar learned basic hydroponics in the cargo bay. By the time they reached their destination, they were no longer refugees running from something, but a family traveling toward a new life. "You look thoughtful today," Kirith said, settling beside him on the porch steps with 2 cups of the herbal tea she made from plants she'd somehow coaxed to grow in New Colorado's soil. The patterns on her blue-gray skin had grown brighter in the months since their arrival, and Marcus had learned that was a sign of contentment among her people. "Just remembering," he said, accepting the tea gratefully. "This time last year I was working my way through a list of assets to repossess. Never imagined I'd be sitting on a farm watching our kids play in a wheat field." "Our children," she corrected gently. "Zentar thinks of Emma as his sister now. And she has taught him more about being brave than I ever could." That was true. Emma Rodriguez was 10 years old and fearless in the way that only children could be. When Marcus had first brought Kirith and Zentar to the farm, where his ex-wife Maria worked as a crop specialist, Emma had taken one look at the frightened alien boy hiding behind his mother and declared him her new best friend. She'd spent the next week teaching him English slang, showing him how to ride the farm's hover bikes, and demonstrating the proper technique for launching oneself into the irrigation pond. "Maria says the yield projections for this season are through the roof," Marcus said. "The Agricultural Council is talking about offering Zeltharian refugees permanent settlement status based on the crop improvements alone." It was true. The songs that Zentar and his mother sang to the growing plants had proven to have a measurable effect on growth rates and resistance to disease. The scientific explanation involved something about harmonic frequencies and plant cellular response, but Marcus preferred to think of it as magic. Good magic, the kind that made the world a better place. "There are others coming," Kirith said quietly. "I received word through the underground networks. 17 families have escaped from various Nexus financial facilities. They seek safe harbor." Marcus nodded. They'd been expecting this. Word spread among refugees the way it always did, through whispered conversations and coded messages passed between desperate people. New Colorado's growing reputation as a place where aliens could disappear into honest work had made it a beacon for those fleeing corporate servitude. "The old Henderson place is still empty," he said, "and the Yamamoto farm needs workers for the autumn harvest. We can make room." "You speak as if this is our decision to make." "Isn't it?" Marcus turned to look at her, this alien woman who had somehow become the center of his world. "We've been here 8 months, Kira. We have jobs, we pay taxes, the kids go to school. This is our home now." She smiled, the expression transforming her face in a way that still took his breath away. "Yes, our home." The sound of hoverbikes approaching made them both look up. A sleek vehicle was coming up the farm road, too expensive and too clean to belong to any of the local farmers. Marcus felt his old instincts kick in, the wariness that had kept him alive through years of dangerous work. "Take Zentar inside," he said quietly. "Use the back door." But it was too late. The vehicle had already stopped, and Emma was dragging her alien brother over to see the interesting newcomers. 3 figures climbed out. 2 humans in corporate suits and a tall, multi-armed alien that Marcus recognized as a Thraxian enforcer. Private military contractors who worked for the highest bidder. "Marcus Rodriguez?" The lead human was a woman with predatory eyes and a smile that never reached them. "I'm Agent Collins from Nexus Financial's Asset Recovery Division. We need to talk." Marcus stood slowly, his hand moving toward the farming tool on his belt that could double as a weapon if necessary. "I'm not running assets anymore. I'm out of that business." "Oh, but you took something with you when you left. 2 very valuable somethings." Her eyes found Kirath, who had moved to stand protectively near the children. "Corporate property that was never properly transferred to our custody." "They're not property," Marcus said, his voice carrying a warning. "They're people, citizens of New Colorado now, with full legal protection under colonial law." Collins laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Colonial law doesn't supersede corporate contracts, Mr. Rodriguez. These aliens are registered assets with a combined market value of 130,000 credits. We're here to collect our property." "Like hell you are!" The Thraxian enforcer shifted, 4 arms moving to weapons Marcus couldn't see but knew were there. Around them, the peaceful afternoon had taken on the electric tension of impending violence. "Dad?" Emma's voice was small and confused. She'd moved closer to Zentar, and Marcus could see the boy's large eyes darting between the strangers and his mother. "It's okay, sweetheart," Marcus said, never taking his eyes off Collins. "These people were just leaving." "I'm afraid not. We have a legal recovery warrant properly filed with the colonial authorities. Stand aside, Mr. Rodriguez, or we'll add obstruction to your list of crimes." That's when Marcus heard it, the low rumble of multiple vehicles approaching fast. Dust clouds on the horizon that resolved into a convoy of farm vehicles, work trucks, and hover bikes. The entire farming community, it seemed, was converging on their location. Maria's voice cut through the tension as she climbed down from the lead truck. "Marcus, everything all right here?" "Corporate asset recovery," he called back. "They want to take Kirath and Zentar." The reaction was immediate and unanimous. 30 farmers, their families, and their workers formed a loose circle around the Nexus Financial team. These were people who had grown up on the frontier, who understood that sometimes you had to stand between your neighbors and the dark. "Problem with that," called out Jake Yamamoto from his position near the barn. "Those 2 are registered workers on my farm. Got the papers filed with the colonial government and everything." "And Zentar attends school with our kids," added Sarah Chen, who had given up freight hauling to become the local teacher. "He's a new Colorado citizen now." Collins looked around at the gathered crowd, her confident expression faltering slightly. "This is obstruction of a lawful corporate action. We can have colonial security here within the hour." "Go ahead and call them," Maria said calmly. "Tom Bradshaw's been looking for an excuse to inspect some corporate warrants. Amazing how many of them turn out to have irregularities when you examine them closely." Marcus felt a surge of affection for these people, his neighbors, who had accepted 3 refugees without question and were now willing to stand against corporate enforcers to protect them. This was what humanity could be at its best. Not the predatory capitalism of the core worlds, but the simple recognition that family was family, regardless of species. "Zentar," Kirath called softly. "Come to me, small one." The boy looked uncertain, caught between his mother and his human friend. Emma solved the dilemma by grabbing his hand and walking with him to where Kirath waited. As they moved, Zentar began to sing, a low melody that seemed to carry the weight of all his people's sorrows and hopes. The effect was electric. Every human present felt it, the way the song seemed to reach into their chests and remind them of everything worth protecting in the world. The Thraxian enforcer actually took a step back, his multiple hands moving away from his weapons. "That's what you want to put a price tag on," Marcus said to Collins. "That's what you want to sell to the highest bidder, a child who can sing hope into existence." Collins had gone pale, whether from the song or the hostile crowd surrounding her team. "The law is the law. Rodriguez, corporate contracts are written by people who've never stood in a wheat field and watched children play," interrupted Judge Patricia Hayes, who had apparently driven out from town when word of the confrontation spread. "As the colonial magistrate, I'm ordering an immediate review of these asset recovery warrants. Until that review is complete, no one is going anywhere." The judge was a formidable woman who had come to New Colorado to escape the corruption of the core world courts. She looked at the corporate team with the expression of someone who had seen their type before and found them wanting. "You don't have jurisdiction," Collins protested. "I have jurisdiction over all legal proceedings on New Colorado. Your corporate warrants will be examined for compliance with colonial law, interspecies protection statutes, and basic sentient rights provisions. If you don't like it, you can file an appeal with the Galactic Court of Justice. The waiting list is currently about 14 months. Marcus watched Collins weigh her options. A legal battle on a frontier world with a hostile judge and an unfriendly jury pool, or retreat to fight another day. The Thraxian enforcer was clearly calculating odds as well, 4 arms crossing in the universal gesture of someone who wasn't getting paid enough for this level of aggravation. "This isn't over," Collins finally said. "Yes, it is," Judge Hayes replied firmly. "Those people are under the protection of colonial law now. Any further harassment will result in criminal charges against Nexus Financial Corporation." The corporate team climbed back into their vehicle, and Marcus watched them drive away until they disappeared into the shimmering heat of the afternoon. Only then did he allow himself to breathe normally again. "Thank you," he said to the crowd of neighbors who had stood with them. "All of you. That's what neighbors do," Jake Yamamoto replied with a shrug. "Besides, Kira's songs have doubled my corn yield. I'm not about to let some corporate vultures steal my good luck charm." The crowd began to disperse, people returning to their afternoon work with the casual attitude of those who had done nothing more dramatic than help a neighbor with a difficult delivery. This was frontier justice at its finest, simple, practical, and absolutely uncompromising when it came to protecting family. As the last of the vehicles drove away, Emma and Zentar emerged from where they'd been hiding behind Kirith. The boy looked shaken but determined, while Emma wore the expression of someone who had just learned an important lesson about standing up to bullies. "Are they gone for good?" Emma asked. "For good," Marcus confirmed, pulling both children into a hug. "You're safe here. All of us are." Later that evening, as the twin suns of New Colorado set over the golden fields, Marcus found himself back on the porch with his unconventional family. Kirith was teaching Emma a gentle Zeltharian lullaby, while Zentar worked on a new drawing. This one showing not just the 3 of them, but the entire farming community standing together under a vast, starry sky. "He draws the future again," Kirith explained, when she noticed Marcus looking at the tablet. "But now his dreams are bigger. He sees not just safety for us, but for all the lost ones who might find their way here." Marcus nodded, understanding. Word would spread through the refugee networks. New Colorado was a place where families stayed together, where alien songs could help human crops grow, where corporate enforcers were met by an entire community willing to stand firm. More would come, seeking the same hope that had brought them here. "Think we can handle it?" he asked. "All these refugees? All the attention from the corporate worlds?" "We're human," Kirith said with a smile. "You adapt. You survive. You protect those who cannot protect themselves. It is what you do." She was right. Marcus realized. This was what humanity could be when it chose to be its best self, not conquerors or exploiters, but protectors and builders, people who could look at a frightened alien child and see their own daughter, people who could listen to an ancient song and hear the future calling. As if summoned by his thoughts, Emma's young voice joined with Kirath's and Zentar's in the lullaby, creating a harmony that seemed to carry promises of tomorrow across the fields. Marcus closed his eyes and let the music wash over him, this blend of human and alien that had somehow become the sound of home. In the distance, the lights of the other farms twinkled like earthbound stars, each one a beacon of hope for the lost and displaced. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new refugees seeking sanctuary, new threats from the corporate powers that saw people as assets to be bought and sold. But tonight, under the twin suns of a world that had learned to sing alien songs, a family sat together on a porch and planned for a future where no child would ever be sold away from their mother again. And that, Marcus thought, was exactly the kind of future worth fighting for.